The Pope and Young Club wants to welcome you as we rally together to ensure our bow hunting opportunities for today and tomorrow. You've come to the podcast that believes in preserving, protecting, and promoting the passion for bow hunting. Join us as we strive to be the voice of today's bow hunter. This is the Pope and Young Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pope and Young Podcast. Jason Roundsville here, joined as always by my co-host Dylan Ray. And we have with us a couple of special guests we're excited to talk to. We have Bryan Barkhardt and Jim Eeckhout. Guys, welcome to the Pope and Young Podcast.
Thanks. Thanks.
We're excited to visit with you. Really love the tribute. That's one of the things we want to talk about is the Fred Bear tribute you guys did. But what I'd like to do first, if we could, is just give our listeners some background. So, Bryan, why don't we start with you? Just give folks an intro for some of those that may not know who you are.
Yeah, I'm Bryan Barkhardt, and I've been bow hunting for 46 years. So I legally started hunting when I was 12 in Michigan. And, I've had a bow in my hand as long as I can remember. So my dad was an avid bow hunter, and he was really my mentor. And it was nice growing up in Michigan because you had such an influence of archery with, Fred Bear being in Michigan. And every year we'd go up north to and actually stop at the Fred Bear Museum. And
Yes.
while Fred would be in the museum. So, as a child, I'd get to see him and I'd see all the mounts, the polar bears, the brown bears, the moose, you name it, the Cape buffalo, the lions. And he was just my childhood hero. And so that's kind of how I got started going to Alaska. He was really my inspiration to, hunt in Alaska and have extreme adventure.
We've actually heard that before. I think Fred Bear has influenced, a couple of generations of very avid bow hunters.
No, for sure.
Yeah. So, and then Jim, how about you?
Okay, I'm Jim Eeckhout, and I'm from Michigan, and same deal as Bryan. Basically, we've been hunting for 40. I've been hunting for 46 years with a bow. I started out young. My dad was an avid bow hunter. Always shot bear archery equipment, and kind of the same thing like Bryan was talking about. We'd make yearly trips up north. We'd end up at the museum in Grayling, and you see the movies or you'd see the mounts, and I would always be reading everything I could, any of his stories or anything archery related when I was a kid, and that kind of lit the fire for me to travel. And like Bryan mentioned about going to Alaska, and actually this will be my 30th year straight going, or 30th year going to Alaska this year.
Wow.
So besides that, all over, and yeah, it's just that kind of lit the fire, to see all that stuff, and like I say, watch the movies and that. So
Nice. And so what's your favorite of all the Fred Bear movies? Which one's your favorite?
I always like the grub stake bow hunt one. I like that, and I like Kodiak Country.
Okay. Yeah. I think a lot of people, the first time that they were maybe even introduced to hunting big bears was that Fred Bear video.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll tell you that, I grew up with four brothers and we all shot, traditional bows, and we would be in the museum seeing Kodiak Country, and we would be in our backyard afterwards. And if you remember when Fred was waving or kind of motioning to the cameraman to come over and get behind him, we would reenact that scene and get behind a tree or get behind, a stump or something and act like we were shooting a brown. Just really had a neat impression.
Yeah. So maybe that's why they don't have any brown bears in Michigan. There's just too many kids out doing that.
Yeah.
So I guess same question for you. Do you have a favorite Fred Bear movie memory? What would be something that stood out for you? Maybe when you got to meet him at the museum, or?
Yeah, I think, when I got to meet him at the museum, that was pretty special. being such a young kid, I really didn't realize, who I was meeting at the time. And I knew he was a special guy and he'd gone all over the world, but really didn't understand the full impact he was having on the industry and archery in general. So, when I look back now at those opportunities that I had when I was a young kid, I just wish I would have, had a lot more pictures of it and got a signature, a bunch of stuff. But it was, at the same time, it was nice kind of having your own special memory.
Yeah. And it's, you talk about folks back then that were going all over the world. Travel wasn't as smooth and as readily available then as what we have now. So it was true on some of these hunts. It was truly an undertaking, not just a trip.
Yeah, if you think of the 1959 Little Delta hunt, that iconic hunt that we commemorated for the tribute hunt, they had a total of 3,000 pounds of gear that shipped in. And they had 14 hunters over the course of a month come in and out of that camp. So
wow.
Think of the logistics now of doing that. And then think of the logistics doing that in 1959.
Yeah. Well, and what we can get by, the same, did you say 3,000 pounds of gear?
Yeah.
The same 3,000 pounds of gear that we take now with ultralight down and dehydrated meals and all the stuff that we have now, that could have weighed twice as much back in the day.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Just technology.
When Jim and I go to Alaska moose hunting, we get to take 50 to 75 pounds. So pretty big difference.
Yeah. So that's so Dylan, our question later will be very apropos for these guys.
Yeah.
Because they've been there. So and so
I want to ask them a preference to that. We'll ask you guys a question later on, but out of all of the equipment that you guys got to take on the tribute hunt, which one was like the most surreal of the items? Like, you know what I mean? Which one?
Yeah,
meant
Dylan,
the most
I'd tell you that I've got a friend that owns Fred Bear's personal bolo tie, and it's the one with a black bear on it. And you see Fred in a lot of pictures wearing that bolo tie. And I asked my friend if I could take that bolo tie to the tribute hunt. And he had some reservations because of how special that piece is. But he said, you know what, this is such a cool hunt. It really deserves to go on it. So he let us, take that tie of Fred's on that hunt. So that was, putting that around your neck and heading out was pretty special. And I did say, I need the GPS coordinates because if you get eaten by a bear, I need that. I need to get that bolo tie back. So anyway, that was a pretty special thing that we had on the trip.
Absolutely.
Very nice.
Now, what about for you, Jim?
I would have to say the bolo tie as well, because just the significance of actually, first off, having it, and like Bryan had mentioned, there so many iconic photos of Fred Bear shows him wearing that all over. So for us to actually have that back and all that, it's pretty special.
Nice. Yeah. Wow. That's so tell us, guys, for folks who may not have heard of it, tell us about the tribute hunt and how that began and what it eventually evolved into.
Yeah, so how it began is I was actually driving to work in 2019. I think it was January. And I was listening to the Fred Bear Fields Notes podcast. And they were recapping the 1959 Little Delta hunt. And it just clicked. I'm like, wow, this is going to be the 60th anniversary of that iconic hunt. And how cool would it be to go up there with original 59 Bear Kodiaks, wood arrows, original bear razor heads, and hunt moose and commemorate that 1959 hunt and pay tribute to both Fred Bear and Glenn St. Charles. And so that was the kind of the origination of the concept. And I called up Jim and ran the idea by him. And instantly Jim said, I'm in. And I didn't think it was going to be a tough sell because I knew Jim was a big bear archery fan and, like myself. And, those are two pioneers and legends of, what we love to do, our lifestyle. And it was just fitting for us to pay them tribute.
Very nice. And so how many total pounds before it was 3,000? How many pounds did you guys get to take in?
Well, I would say in total, we took in about 150 pounds, between
Okay.
I.
Between both of us.
Yeah. And, but I did tell Jim that because we had the, archery community kind of rallying around the hunt when they were hearing about it. And we had 40 donated items, from people across the country that we took on the tribute hunt. And I told Jim, we may have to pay for another, gear flight here with all the things that were coming in, but we were able to squeeze them in the bush plane and make it happen.
Nice. Well, it's neat when, the archer community is kind of like that sometimes, where they get excited about something and everybody kind of jumps in and pitches in. So we've had a little bit of that, when we did our relaunch and our rebrand in Reno last year. A lot of people kind of almost re-energized some folks that, folks that have always been around Pope and Young, but it kind of gave them a little shot of energy to see the renewed enthusiasm at the club. So. Yeah,
and I'll give you one example. I was at the Pope and Young convention in Omaha, and well, I'll give you a couple examples. But at that convention, I had the opportunity to meet Dick Mock and Carol Mock, and Dick actually went to the little Delta cabin in the early '60s. So after Fred and Glenn were there, but he told me the story about the grizzly bear going through the roof and how he had to repair the roof with a rolled aluminum product. So it was really neat kind of hearing his story because he was firsthand. And then later that evening, I was actually up in Jim Willems' room, just, having a drink. And Dan Willems, his brother, he heard about the hunt. And I said, I've got a Fred Bear knife kit. So it comes with the sheath, the knife, the file, and then a stone. And Dan's like, hold on a second. And he went to his room and basically said, here's the Fred Bear knife kit that you can take. And I said, well, I've got my dad had the knife, the file, and the sheath, or he was missing the file. So Dan gave me the file to take up, with my dad's knife and sheath. So it was just, generous people rallying around, really paying tribute to Fred and Glenn.
Yeah. Yeah. Fitting folks to be paid tribute to.
Yeah. And Glenn was the founder of Pope and Young. So, every time I would go to Seattle, I would stop and see Glenn. And that's when he had the Pope and Young Museum was there, really. His museum was there. And it was just, we would go up into his office. He'd pull out the file cabinet and pull out a manila folder and just tell me about the hunt. So he just had all of his hunts in a file folder. And it was just really, really neat to hear it firsthand from Glenn. And he said, Bryan, you ought to be videotaping this. And I said, I know, Glenn, but I think it's just special to be private. So,
yeah.
You guys had some arrows made from Susan, didn't you, for that hunt?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Jimmy.
We did was so when Bryan was talking about that good friend of ours that had Fred Bear's original bolo tie, he also had all the original slides from that hunt from 1959.
Oh, wow.
So we were over there one day before the hunt, and he let us go through those slides, see pictures that I'm quite sure very few people have ever seen. But on one of the slides was a very good picture of Fred Bear's arrows. So I took a picture of that, and then based off what length arrows and everything, I drew a diagram up in the color scheme up. And then we got a hold of Sherwood Shafts to get the shafts, and then they shipped them directly to Suzanne. And then I sent the color scheme and the pattern to her as well. But Bryan had you talked to her about making the arrows, and she really didn't want to, did she?
Well, what happened is I called Suzanne, and she said, Bryan, I told her about the tribute hunt, and she said, Bryan, I'm so backed up, I don't know if I can do it. And I said, Suzanne, you don't understand. This is paying tribute to your dad and Fred Bear, and in commemorating the 1959 hunt. And at the end of the day, she said, "All right, I'll do it." And then she really got excited about it. So it was just pretty neat for her to have that St. Charles connection with the hunt. And I know your listeners won't be able to see it, but I'll show you guys, what the arrow looks like.
We actually do this podcast on video, so they can head over to YouTube and look at it.
Okay, so that's great. So here's the arrow, but it was basically two natural barred, with the cock feather being a yellow, a natural barred turkey dyed yellow feather. And then there's the actual cresting that Fred used in 1959. And at the time, he was shooting an entire white shaft. It helped him with his instinctive shooting, having that visual. And then there's an original 1959 bear razorhead. And so that's what Jim and I were using on the hunt. And Suzanne made these arrows. And what's really cool is and I don't know if we want to spill the beans, but I was fortunate to kill a moose. And a year after I killed the moose in 2019, I was making a stalk on another moose and actually found the kill arrow straddling a moose trail. And here's the picture of that arrow. So it's still in phenomenal shape. It's still got the bear razor head on it. There was actually some moose hair in the bear razor head, but I couldn't believe a year later, just stalking a moose, I looked down and just was dumbfounded to see my arrow from the prior year that I actually killed the moose with. So it's just really cool.
Nice. Bryan told that story on the Bear Archery podcast, and I've gotten so many messages and emails and like, that's crazy that he found his arrow a year later. Holy cow, that's insane. So, I mean, I was blown away by the amount of people that reached out saying, that's incredible. I can't even find my own arrows on my own property a year later, much less in Alaska.
Yeah, that was really, a surreal moment, if you want to use that term. And, especially when you're making a stalk on a moose and you look and you find
that's got to throw some extra confidence right there. You're like, yep, that was from last year. I've totally got this.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I ended up not getting that moose.
Okay.
That's all right.
There goes my theory. That's
yeah.
Jason just rubbing it in.
Yeah. I don't have 46 years of bow hunting. I'm just in the 30s. So we're
well, something else that's kind of cool that Suzanne did for Bryan and myself is she made us each 2 extra arrows, flu arrows. And I don't know if you can see this, but those are the original feathers from 1959.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, those were Glenn's. So when I was talking about
feathers.
Yeah, when I was talking to her about making the arrows, she said, and she finally agreed to do it. Then she said, I've got some of my dad's, full-length feathers from 1959 that he actually used. And she said, how about if I make a couple extra flus? And what was really neat, it was neat having that, those arrows, but she signed those as well. So they're pretty neat.
I actually went on an antelope hunt this year, and the guys there that I was with, they were all trad shooters, and one of them actually brought arrows that she had made, and he had little pins, and everybody got to sign, and he presented each one of us with one of those arrows. So it's pretty cool.
That's a great,
I've got it
Yeah.
hanging up in my shop. It's a pretty neat deal. So.
What is Dylan?
That's a panel arrow. So every year at panel, we get all of the measures, and everybody involved gets together. This year, Roy Grace had those made up for everyone at panel. Everybody signed them, and everybody gets to leave one.
These were made by Susan.
Oh, they were? Okay.
Yep. Her signature's on here, I believe.
Well, in that case, I've got 2 of hers.
Yeah, these were made by Susan.
Yeah, Suzanne does a great job, and Jim and I were just thrilled when she agreed to do it. So, just like I said, neat to have that connection.
It's neat. It's kind of like finding the arrow. It all comes full circle.
Yeah.
So very nice. And So going to as many times you guys have been to Alaska, what's your favorite species to chase up there?
No question, moose. I mean, I just, being up close, with 10, 15 yards to a 1,600-pound bull in the rut that wants to take you out, I don't think it gets any more exciting than that. And I've been charged by a bull moose twice and thought my life was going to be over for sure. But that's definitely my favorite animal to hunt. I love where they live. I love how big they are. And it's just, the only part I don't like is when you get one down on the ground. You gotta pack it up. That's a lot of work, but it's labor of love. So I'm going to keep doing it. So I've been moose hunting in Alaska since 2008. So what is that? 14 consecutive years. And when I first went up there in 2008, I told my pilot, book me through 2020. And he said, like, are you sure? I'm like, I'm absolutely sure. And this last year I told him, book me through 2030. So
nice.
As long as I can.
Yeah. How about you, Jim?
I'm on the same page with Bryan. I like hunting moose. I mean, I kind of like hunting anything in Alaska, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Just being up there. But like Bryan said, when you're doing a stalk on a moose and getting that close and bow range with one, and I also really like hunting the caribou as well too. So, but Bryan's right. I mean, when the moose is in the rut and they go into, like he calls it, the trance or whatever, and you see that happen, it's pretty cool.
Huh. That sounds fun. So now how about the lower 48?
I'd say whitetails.
Yeah. It might be evidenced by your background there.
I don't think you had to answer for us to know.
Yeah. I was just right before we started recording, I was just telling Bryan how nice it was to finally get somebody else with a kudu on camera. So I've been pretty lonely for a while. So how about you, Bryan?
What's that?
What's your favorite thing in the lower 48?
It would definitely be whitetails, because I've hunted them since, I was 12 years old. So they hold a pretty, special place in my heart. I mean,
yeah,
it's one of those things where I wish all the seasons didn't happen in like September,
Right.
I'd love to go elk hunting and all that, but when you're in Alaska for a month, hunting moose, it takes a lot of those other opportunities away. So anyway, it would be whitetails.
Yeah. I think we've had a lot of folks on the show. A lot of people really, whitetails kind of where it started with them and where their heart belongs. And we hear elk often. A lot of the Western guys like the elk or some of the mule deer, but I'm trying to think. Dylan, is this our first moose as a favorite species?
Believe so.
Okay. So,
but Jason, I want to make a note, and I think part of the reason why on whitetails is because, you talk a lot about having to be drawn in your own home state. Like whitetails are so readily available that, I mean, within a 5-hour drive, I can hunt Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri within 5 hours of driving, and that's all, over-the-counter whitetails. Well, Kansas if you're a resident, and so I think that's why you get that answer so much is because so much opportunity. You can hunt them anywhere and anytime. I mean, not anytime, but you know what I mean. That's why it is for me. Somebody asked me one time, if you can only choose one animal to hunt, what would it be? And sure, you want to hunt elk, you want to hunt those things, but at the same time, if I don't choose whitetail, then I only get to go on one hunt a year. If I choose whitetail, I can hunt as much as I want.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunities, and it's, you hear about it, and there's places in the South where you can go out and shoot a buck a day. And, somebody from the West who's, there's places you'd love to hunt, but it's 20, 25 years just to draw one tag. It's a little bit different on the opportunity spectrum.
Bryan, you shot a nice turkey last week, didn't you?
Yeah, and I am not a turkey hunter. So, I just got fortunate. I was actually, Carol Mock invited the Compton board down to Plum Creek Cabin, which is a pretty special historic place in and of itself. And after we had our board meeting, we actually were able to hunt. A few of us hunted, and I was able to take a nice Merriam. So it was
awesome
an experience.
Nice.
Jason, I don't care about board meetings, but when's our staff meetings going to take place over some turkeys?
Man, I'll tell you, right now we're lucky to get a pizza out of that deal. I'm not sure I can swing a turkey hunt.
Jason, you got to step up your game, man.
I guess so. Gosh, nothing like being called out live just like that.
Hey, you got to shoot a whitetail last year because of a staff meeting. That was pretty cool.
That was pretty cool. We actually had our staff meeting in Minnesota, and then I stayed over, was working on a project, got to go spend a little time in a tree stand, and shot a whitetail. That was a fun experience.
You guys want to talk about stress? I drove overnight home from that, and it was like November 4th. And so I was driving overnight in the heat of the rut across the Midwest. And I just kept thinking the whole time, I'm like, don't let any deer jump out in front of me. I saw tons of deer, but I was safe the whole time. So,
wait, you guys are having meetings during the rut?
Well, Jason wanted to hunt.
Oh,
hey, and I was actually excited for him because I wanted him to experience whitetail country, and I wanted him to experience it in the rut. I mean, it's one thing to come, October 5th, and it's another thing to come November 6th, 7th, 8th. So I was pumped for him.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I love whitetail hunting, like I said, and I know Jim does. And it's a lot of fun being in a stand and seeing the rut activity and all that. But really, my personal preference is spot and stalk hunting. So that's what I love about Alaska. I go to Kodiak all the time, hunting the blacktail deer, the blacktail, and go there hunting bear, and it's just something about being eye level on the ground, matching your wits against those animals makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah. It was neat where I got to hunt. Was actually in Wisconsin, and I just hadn't been there before, and so you never know what to expect. And it was kind of neat because I saw bucks just about every day. What surprised me is I kind of expected to see, I thought I'd see, like a dozen, 15, 20 does a day, and then, hope to get a good buck in range. And it was a little bit different. 90% of what I saw were bucks.
You should hunt some southern states.
Yeah.
Jason, don't complain about seeing bucks.
No, not complaining. Just total observation. And it's, I think Dylan's disappointed because I didn't come back with the fork and horn.
Yeah.
So, not that I'm too proud for that. Just that, where I was, they're like, oh no, that's a friend of mine that invited me. She says, hey, my dad is going to be torqued if you shoot a little one. Do not shoot a little one. And I'm like,
I texted him the first morning and said, forky or bust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was, fortunately got one, and wound up being a 9 pointer because it had a busted tine on one side. So
nice.
Tell him why you had to think about that so long, Jason.
I don't know, because you guys add everything up. So we're a little bit different here.
These Michigan boys will be on my side. They tell me I'm wrong because they're like, oh, I shot a nice 3-point, and I'm like, 3-point, and they're like, yeah,
3x3 with eye guards.
I'm like, yeah. So you mean an 8-point? If it's a 3x3 with eye guards, it's an 8-point. And they're like, no, it's 3-point. And I'm like, wait a second, what? Yeah, they're all backwards up there.
See,
Dylan.
We just like to provide a little bit more, information on our, it's like, because a 4x4 with eye guards, what you would call a 10, that's a little bit different than, if you shoot a 1x7 or something, which would be an 8. We just like to provide a little more information so that we're all on the same page.
Well, you've heard about the Michigan 11 points.
What now? Tell me about that. Oh yeah.
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 There's a lot of those.
Yeah. Dylan's favorite's the 4-pointer.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
All day long, baby.
Hey, you know what? And what was that thing you said? He said, hey, it was wider than my knife.
Yeah.
So,
hey, I like killing too much to let them walk by. You know what I mean?
Well, they all look good in the freezer too.
yeah.
That they do. You can't tell how big their horns were when they're cut up and in freezer and packaging.
Yeah. I do have to tell you, that whitetail was pretty tasty. I had a bunch of luck. I took a bunch of stuff out there and so I couldn't bring it all back, which I think my host was pretty thankful for. But I did peel out a back strap and some tenderloins and that made the trip back to Oregon. And it was very good. I do have to commend it for very high quality table fare.
Yeah.
Especially since I'm not the world's strongest cook.
What's your guys' favorite wild game to consume?
Well, this is going to be redundant, but I love moose. I mean, I haven't had sheep, so I hear everybody talk about sheep being so good, and I don't know if it's because of the terrain and it's so extreme, and then you finally get one and it's just special, and that's why it tastes so good.
Sweat equity. You got some sweat equity in that one.
Yeah, I think that may be part of it, but for me, the interior fillets on a moose over an open fire in moose camp, it doesn't get any better than that. I also like Kodiak blacktail. That's got a really good flavor. So those would be two on the top of my list.
Yeah, I mean, can somebody second me on javelina? Can I get a second?
Yeah.
If they're in fajitas, maybe.
I shot